Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining. I know life's always busy, but definitely a pretty busy time for the moment for community groups and organisations in Oxford. I'm Zoe Spriggins, I'm Chief Exec at OCF. Some of you might have expected to see my colleague Lucy Mangra, who was our Head of Grants and Inclusion chairing. Just to let those of you who knew her, really sadly, Lucy's mother has been ill abroad and she has decided to spend more time with her abroad caring for her. So really sadly for her and for us, she has left OCF. Definitely the right decision, but still a real loss. But they do also say in life that when one door closes, another often opens. I'm really delighted to have Claire Hughes on the line, who's currently with Sophia and will be for another month, but will be joining us as our new Head of Grants and Inclusion. And really excited to have her join. Don't ask her any questions yet, because that would definitely put her on the spot. But I'll be chairing today, and we remain completely committed to running the cost of living grants round and have the funding. But I hope you can bear with us just a little bit on the timings. We're broadly aiming to launch it by June and to make funding decisions by the summer. But just as we've had a little bit of staff changeover, still working on confirming the timings. So that's some practicalities. Just final time that I'll say the housekeeping, but make sure you put your name and organisation. Do feel free to eat lunch, because I know it's happening over lunchtime. Mute yourself while you're eating and if you're not talking. And we are recording this workshop and we may share sound bites from it to help with our fundraising. So just drop me a message on Zoom if that's not okay. So to get into the real substance of all of this, I think you don't need me to tell you that the cost of living crisis is continuing, and we're really conscious that even though maybe some of the energy pressures over winter might have lessened, things like food and drink, transport, accommodation are still critically expensive. So we're really committed to open another grants round to help with the cost of living. We did launch one last autumn. And so really what we want to ask you today is what's changed, if things have changed, and when we launch another round, what should that look like? And last time we had the same consultation, and the insight from community organisations was really helpful, both in terms of structuring what the grants round looked like and to try and tailor it to what's needed, but also because the insights that people offered are really helpful for when we reach out to other foundations to say, do they want to pool their funds with us? So that's the goal for this session today. What we'll do is write up what gets discussed. We'll share that publicly. We also conducted a survey that I'm sure many of you completed, and thank you. So we'll be sharing the results from that as well. And that will really be used to inform what that grants round looks like. So 3 questions that we're planning to ask today. First of all, what are the issues with the cost of living crisis now? Secondly, how have they changed from 2022? If they have, really keen to discuss that. And then also, how, therefore, should we tackle them? And what does that mean for what funding's needed? And as there's quite a few of us, and we really want to get into some detailed discussion, we're going to have breakout rooms. It will take us a little bit of time to assign those because we want to have at least one OCF person in each one to facilitate. So looks like Kate has got those set up. I don't know if you're all doing online meetings all the time, or we've got a bit more back into in-person ones, but I think we're still getting back into the swing of online webinars now. So we'll now get randomly allocated into breakout rooms. You'll have an OCF person to facilitate and just sort of remind you about the question, but really keen to have somebody to feedback who's not an OCF person. So if you're feeling keen to volunteer, please do. So Kate, I will let you hit that button and send us off to our breakout rooms.
Yeah, so I'm going to open the rooms now. You'll be invited to join a breakout room. So please just follow the instructions and join the room, and I will stay in the main room and pick up anybody who's not able to join a breakout room. So I'm going to open those now. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the main room. I hope you had good discussions in your breakouts. And Zoe's back. Hi, Zoe.
Hi, Kate. Yeah, we got a bit carried away, and I think Hassan was literally just speaking. So Hassan, yeah, do chip in if we don't summarise. I also failed to pressure anyone into being a representative, but I'm just seeing that who's come back from my group, who was there all the way through. Ewan, do you feel like you could sort of summarise our points in our session?
I can, but I haven't got your notes.
What stuck out for you? I'm sure the rest of us will prompt you if you don't remember our great points.
I'm sure you will. Yeah, I think the one of the key things was around staff recruitment and staff retention. So that's something that happened last year, but it's going to stay with us ad infinitum because we had to put staff rates up in order for them to be able to fund their own cost of living crisis, and in order to recruit and retain. So that's going to stay with us now. We're going to get percentage increases on that salary. So that's something that's going to be with us ad infinitum. With regard to energy costs, I think a lot of us probably got into fixed rate contracts, and they're going to be with us for however long the fixed rate contract is. And we don't see the cost of energy coming down much at all from us. The main providers are not bringing energy costs down. So that's for anybody with facilities or using energy, that's quite a big issue. One of the issues was about trying to find best deals. So that was around digital. Some people have access to digital, some people don't. Some people are able to travel to get best deals, whether it be in terms of shopping or taking their families out for a day out or something similar. So a lot of people don't have access to digital and so can't access those particular offers. There was quite a lot of conversation. What am I trying to say? Around numbers. So in terms of actual need for what we do, Hassan made a good point right at the very end, where his activities are free and he's completely inundated with people. You know, myself at Tomley, we've never seen better numbers because we offer such a great value day out. And I think Olivia was the same, saying that she's seeing great numbers. So there's clearly a need, but I think what many of us are finding is that our costs are going up. And if we're income based, which we are as a charity, that income is going down. And last but not least was the sort of where we get our income from. So if we're focusing on the trust, foundation and statutory income, clearly there's a lot more people trying to access those particular funds. The market's very crowded and very competitive, and you know, I've never really felt sorry for trusts and foundations, but I do now, because I suspect they're getting huge amounts of well, in fact I know they're getting huge amounts of applications, and they're struggling to try and find criteria to weed out people that they're not actually going to be able to fund. So that's a highly competitive market, and smaller charities who don't have professional fundraisers or a fundraising team, you've got one-off individuals potentially who are chief cook and bottle watcher. They're making those funding applications, and I suspect their strike rate is pretty low. So they were the key things that I took out from that, Zoe. I'm happy for you to add whatever I've missed out.
No, I think absolutely. The one thing that I would add that I think several of you made was this idea that everyone's having to focus on just helping people to struggle to survive, whereas actually as charities, they want to help people to be thriving and flourishing and progressing. And I think that feeling that, for example, if things are easing, which I think a lot of people said not for the groups that they're working with, that might just be a question of debt getting a little bit less. It's not about sort of life getting better. So just recognizing that, and I suppose maybe not dropping our ambition that we're trying to do more than help people sort of struggle through. So yeah, that was my group. I think we were group one. Did anyone want to put their hand up from another group to feedback?
You were group 2, so room 2. So somebody from room 1 or room 3 needs to also feedback, please.
I think I was group 1, and Emmy, do you mind? Emmy was kindly volunteering to be our sort of feedback person.
Yeah, of course, thank you. We had some insights from food community larder food bank service in Cholsey, which highlighted that there is really strong demand in that particular area, even though it's more one of the more affluent villages. There still is absolutely the demand there, and there are more families approaching kind of this time this year than there would have been previously, who might not have been a kind of traditional fit for the type of family who might have needed help, but more of those types of families are struggling. And that what has been kind of observed is that signposting to the community larder service isn't kind of sufficient in terms of breaking down some of those barriers around stigma, the stigma associated with accessing help. But one of the things that has been working well is really kind of utilising the personal connections and building trust and rapport through other different community-based projects that are going on. And then once that trust has been built, signposting in once people feel kind of safe enough to be able to share that they do need help. So I think that kind of goes to show that there's more work that needs to be kind of invested in, that supports volunteer-led initiatives that are building relationships within the community and helping to break that stigma down. We also had some perspectives shared from Vale Community Impact, who provide advice, and there's been a big increase in telephone consultations, so from 8,200 up to 10,265, and a lot of those concerns and issues are connected to financial problems and worries, debt management, and one of the issues that was highlighted is that for many people there has been a sense of kind of adjusting to government assistance or schemes that have been rolled out over the last few years, which have given people a bit of a safety net, but those are kind of starting to peter out. I think the energy boost ended this month or last month for people. So seeing an increase in kind of worry and anxiety now that those extra kind of additional packages of support are going away, and what that is leaving in terms of an added vulnerability is that people have had a kind of extended period of time where they haven't had to have learned those independent skills around financial management and financial health. So the need for investing in kind of financial literacy programs is really there. And then I was sharing from the kind of perspective of Oxfordshire Youth, who, you know, we provide direct delivery support to young people with a range of different challenges that they're living with, but we also are an infrastructure organisation providing support to the children and young people's sector. So in terms of the impact, the biggest issues that the kind of community of the sector are experiencing are just reinforcing what Ewan just said a minute ago. The kind of recruitment and retention issue in Oxfordshire is particularly acute because of the cost of housing, the inaffordability of housing here, the inflationary impacts on our budgets have been really tough, and a lot of funders aren't or haven't taken necessarily that into account when asking charities to submit budgets. A 10% overhead doesn't cover the rise in inflation, which is leaving charities much more under-resourced, I think, and like was highlighted in more demand than ever. And in terms of young people, the mental health challenges that are being experienced are are much more complex. So the level of safeguarding disclosures and the complexity of safeguarding disclosures that are being handled by youth workers and frontline practitioners is just beyond kind of anything we've ever seen before. That has an impact on youth workers in terms of their own well-being and resilience, and more support is needed for the frontline practitioners to make sure that they're equipped to be handling those issues. But also the kind of latest research around kind of young people's mental health. I think that 3/4 of young people feel a sense of hopelessness about the future. That was a national UK report. The kind of levels of anxiety about what the future holds are linked to money, climate, and kind of job prospects, employability prospects. Those are some of the key issues. Yeah,
I might just pause you, but that was fantastic. Well, not in terms of the news, but in terms of her feedback. So thank you. Can I just ask for the final group, who I think might have been with Susanna? Anyone going to raise that?
That was me. I can feedback on our group. Yeah, so it's very, very similar findings, really. I think one of the common themes was that whatever the service delivery that the groups are providing, is that they've seen that they need to be adapting and are actually being required to provide far more than their initial response. So with regards to, say, the food larder, they're actually finding that what people need is more than just food. So they're finding that they're actually providing support for mental health, signposting people to other services. So they find that they're actually doing a lot more than originally set out to do, which of course puts extra pressure on the charities. It puts extra pressure on the staff. I think the other sort of common theme is that certainly with regards to income, we're seeing a fall in donations from individuals and donations from other organisations. One of the one mentions was parish councils. So it's just where all the financial pressures are on everyone, and there isn't enough funding to go around. And that really all this is happening in the background of living in Oxford and Oxfordshire, which one of the most expensive places to live in the country. So straight away you've got that as your background when you're trying to tackle a cost of living crisis, and that obviously affects the individuals living here. But also from a fundraising point of view, Oxford is perceived as a wealthy place, and therefore won't necessarily be on a list of priority areas for funders when they're looking nationally about areas to fund. So I think, you know, that's where it has the two sort of negative impacts of trying to run community groups in Oxford. Yeah, and I think again, lots more advice needed for people on debt management, on universal credit, and again, it's going back to approaching that initial service like a food bank that you go to, but suddenly needing to be able to provide that kind of advice as well. Have I missed anything out, my group?
Sounds like that was very comprehensive. Great. Well, thank you everyone so much for what you contributed in the breakout groups, and also to the brave people who fed back or got forced into feeding back in Ewan's case. So it is a pretty challenging picture. I think that's obviously why we're going to launch the funding. So I hope our second and final breakout group, we can slightly raise our hopes in terms of talking about what would be useful. And I think that's implicit in a lot of what you've said already, but it would be really helpful to hear. So what activities or what kind of support is needed, and connected to that, therefore, what kind of funding is useful, what structuring of funding, whether that's what it goes towards, when it gets released, the scale of it, any and all, take that as broadly as you want, but really what kind of support is most useful for you as organisations to provide to the people that you work with, and therefore for OCF to be looking as the funding that we would open up. So we'll go into that group and we will take, I think, 15 minutes in the breakout group to really get into what would be the most useful support to provide. So I think Kate will dispatch us off to our groups again. And this time, and this is a note to myself, let's identify who's going to feed back at the beginning so they have a chance to take notes.
Okay, so I'm just going to put you into your breakout rooms now, which will be the same rooms as previously. So just follow the link. Hi everybody, welcome back. So we're just waiting for the other breakouts to close, and you'll join us in a couple of seconds. And then we'll hear feedback from you.
Hi Kate, we're just back
Okay.
with our group.
Everyone's back.
Shall I go in the opposite order this time? So who was in Susanna's group, for want of a better name?
Laura is very kindly our spokesperson again.
Hi. So yeah, I think we all pretty much agreed on the same points. It really, we would like it to all be about core costs again, not new projects, not anything new or anything sort of innovative, just really concentrating on those core costs again. And we did actually all agree that we felt that OCF was one of the best funders to do that, and that over the years we've seen how much OCF has listened to what we've been asking for. So we weren't referring to OCF when we talk about this, but we were saying that we see it in other funders that we can meet the criteria, but then you'll get we don't fund salaries, we don't fund core costs, and you know, new projects is not what we want to be doing right now. And you know, there was the question on, would we want funding to be looking at adapting our services, adapting our organisation to make it more sustainable? Yes, absolutely. But and if the funding is there, then fantastic. We would you know, very much want to take that, but not until we know we've got the core costs and the you know, the focus of the operation covered first. And then at that time, if we felt we had that, we could then look at doing something different. And then the other point that was made was just looking at taking in consideration that what childcare costs are like at the moment, and how organisations need to be thinking about their timings and their venues, just to enable parents to be able to attend different activities, so that they can be really putting their input into, I guess, you know, organisations and meetings like this. But yeah, all comes down to those core costs again.
Really helpful. I don't think there'll be any big surprises from my group either in terms of that, but Olivia, do you want to report back for us?
Yeah, so again, echoing the thing of moving away from project-based funding to more like overhead funding. A big thing we said as well was multi-year. When we're choosing to apply to funding, the multi-year ones are always going to take priority, just because of the stability it gives the organisation. And then that kind of prompted a discussion of whether that would then mean less funds or less grants available, in which case, if we're going to get smaller grants, to reduce the application and reporting procedures, and that it should reflect the amount of money that you receive in return, just because of the growing need. We're doing so many more applications because we're receiving less. It would be nice if the reporting procedures kind of fit in with that to reduce our workload as fundraisers. Another thing would be to look at whether or not it's possible for people to get more involved with the organisations, so going out to see the work that they're doing to reduce the bias perhaps on numbers, especially for those that work in very small communities to very specific projects. In comparison to a community-wide kind of organisation, it's going to look like they're doing less in terms of numbers, but actually what impact is that having on that specific community is probably incomparable. Another thing was that feedback could be altered a little bit, more consistent, more in depth, as well as criteria could be more explicit, and know from the get-go what sort of things that we're being judged on, so that when it comes to the results, we know exactly where we've gone wrong for future years. And I think that kind of summarises it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely heard it. People are working harder than ever to make applications. So what can we do to make that an easier experience? And then finally, who was in Sarah's group?
I've actually volunteered to feedback this time for our group, very much echoing what we've already heard from the other two groups. Hugely, it's all about core costs more than ever, and it would be easier if organisations could sort of apply with just their nuts and bolts work that is proven to work, rather than having to think of new projects, etc. And it often spreads them thinner to come up with the new projects. It's not that they're not worthwhile, it's just that sometimes actually the nuts and bolts work is where they can be more efficient. It was suggested in our group that events like this, where we have commonality between the groups, actually having this contact, if there's anything OCF can do to help instigate that sort of thing, it's really helpful to find out from each other, especially where there's commonality in different organisations' work, to be able to have that cross-reference and exchange of ideas. And then I also made a note that needs have changed amongst users. So, for example, signposting used to work, and now it's not seeming to be as effective. Social shame seems to have sort of come into the equation, and people are not so readily admitting that they need help. So that's requiring a more skilled sort of approach from volunteers or workers to sort of see and go and find those individuals, rather than the individuals just comfortably coming out and putting their hands up and saying they need some help. So that's a bit more of a slow burner and needs a certain type of approach. And then we also spoke about the type of activities. The cost of living crisis has sort of meant that a lot of activities that are being organised are the free ones, anything like that, whereas actually at some point we need to get back to addressing positive activities that can be sort of about families, emotional well-being, etc. Things like swimming, you know, for a group, or inviting families to go on a swimming event. Transport is a problem. Lots of the local bus routes in Oxfordshire have been cancelled in the last year or so, and so community transport is very, very important to get people to events as well. And then a mention of some activities targeted to sort of diverse disabled communities who have been more adversely affected by the cost of living crisis and the pandemic.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Sarah. Fantastic. Well, I know we've got the time booked in till 15:15, but I think we can conclude earlier, give you a little bit more time back. I think there's definitely been some common themes, as was noted in the chat, but we're going to write this all up and share it back out with you. I think my sort of my closing reflection on this is, I think for decades, charities have said core cost support is what needed, not having to concoct projects to get extra funding. And the one glimmer of hope, I think, is that with the experience of the pandemic and cost of living, it is really acutely obvious about why that's needed. So I think there's definitely an opportunity, and I found, speaking to the donors whose funds that we manage, that people are really, really open to understanding that and knowing that charities need to be flexible and they need to support with the core costs. So I think that's definitely something that OCF can keep listening to and really properly respond to that. So that argument's come out loud and clear, and I think really resonates. So we will take that away along with all the other comments and be reporting back to you and to everyone else. And I think it was mentioned, one group got onto discussing an idea that we've been talking about internally is, of course, cost of living crisis is acute right now. The climate crisis is another ongoing one, but we barely have time to think about it right now. But I think Emmy mentioned about sort of how young people are worrying about that as one component of their future. So sort of what as OCF can we do to support organisations that also want to be acting in an environmentally conscious way, but not by loading on another requirement or report, but if the work that you're doing you would like to alter, in whether that's from the lights need replacing, I think I'm thinking about the OCF office, into LED, to something more fundamental, what would that look like? And do you have the cash for that, or is that something that should be considered in an application as well? So I will leave you with that question, but if any thoughts spring to mind, would love to hear from you. But I think most fundamentally, we've really heard about the support needed for the core costs, and to really make the sort of transaction that you have with OCF as low in friction as possible. So thank you all so much for your time, whether it was giving up your lunch break or missing other meetings and work, but really, really appreciated. Yeah, we're planning to be launching this round by June, so we'll be in touch. So thank you very much, everyone. Bye.